Good morning and welcome to the August 2010 meeting for the Arbortext user group. Today we have a great pleasure of having Todd Nolan from a large Canadian telecom talking about deploying and maintaining the large single sourcing solution. Todd's been working with XML publishing for more than a decade and supported teams of tremendous size and still very large size and gone through a lot over those years. Todd, we're really thrilled to have you. Welcome.
Thanks very much, Liz.
You're going to go ahead and get started. And anybody has questions, you can either raise your hand or I will unmute your lines. And if you use the question box, that's how I'll get questions. You're welcome to do either way. Todd's happy to get your questions.
Okay. Caution everyone, if there's any questions that are shown up in the question box, and if I don't see them, just either holler or maybe Liz, you can point that out to me. I'm just going to be trucking along, and so I may not notice those comments as I'm speaking to these slides. Anyway, so good morning and good afternoon to maybe some of you if you're on the East Coast like me. Just wanted to share some information about deploying and maintaining a large single sourcing solution. The topic is about kind of focusing more on the post. You've gone through the pains of developing business cases, getting those funds in place, and now you're faced with implementing a single sourcing solution. Looking at those kinds of implementation and deployment tasks, challenges, and what are the steps you're going to take to deploy the system. What I'm going to do for this session is, of course, focus on a particular case that I was involved in with the company I'm with, and use that as a case, a business case, for us to talk about what some of the things were that I discovered and the team discovered here as we went along that process, that implementation life cycle, if you will. So if you have any questions as we go along, I have no problem letting this be a little organic and ask me any questions, and I'll certainly try my best to answer them if I can. So I'm going to start off today with a quote, and when I saw this quote, I thought it was great. It's so described my experience with deploying large single sourcing solutions. And it was an anonymous quote. I don't know if anyone ever claimed this one, but it was, the very first day of a new solution is deployed. It is the very first day it has become a legacy system ready for change, and no truer statement was ever made about single sourcing solutions. Often the business requirements are changing and evolving constantly, even if you don't know it. And the key is going to be to have business processes and some governance in place to handle those changes. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about the background of the single sourcing solution that I was involved in, a large one I was involved in. And as Liz mentioned, I work for a large telecom equipment provider who have thousands of customers, including many large telecom companies in the U.S. and worldwide. So traditionally, telecom in the past has been hardware-centric, but the products have moved rapidly to a software world as things have evolved in the telecom industry. Hundreds of products, many use platforms for extending other products. You have an extensive amount of reuse of component products into larger solutions. And this is, I've found, is typical not only of this telecom company, but of many others as well. Several million pages of product documentation. It's a long history of hardware and software products have been published and continue to be published. And at the beginning of our journey down the large single sourcing approach, so pre-XML days, the technical pubs community really used content formatters quite extensively. And content formatters, of course, being the frame makers, the words, all those desktop publishing tools. So our challenge and vision with this program, I basically summarize in these points. And the key thing here was to deliver easier to use web-based documentation to our customers. Traditionally, we had been more paper-based, paper-oriented, PDF-oriented in delivery of documentation through CDs and paper products. Moving to a more improved delivery channel agility, and I'll touch on what that means throughout this presentation. Ultimately, things like performance, such as getting faster to delivery, was one key aspect of getting more agile with delivery of the product documentation. Maximizing, of course, along with that, maximizing single sourcing and reuse of content. I mean, those I've bolded and italicized these elements because these were sort of the core and the heart of the whole reason why we were going this way. There's a lot of benefits and savings to be achieved by single sourcing via an XML format to multiple delivery channels, for example. Also of reusing on the back office part, reusing in your authoring repository documentation that's already been created. Implementing a more robust metadata taxonomy strategy. So not only on the authoring, having more control over how you're tagging your information, but also having corporately a better approach from a taxonomy standpoint, and how all of your document types connect together and get delivered through, for example, a web portal. Enabling a more complete end-to-end lifecycle management. Not having various systems to control the life cycle of your documents, but rather having a more consolidated approach and hopefully with CMS's more powerful approach to how you control your document management. And of course, as is the case with many of these kinds of business cases, your aim is to reduce the similar processes, and particularly the redundant tools and systems that are in place. And we had a lot of those redundant type systems with different groups doing the same thing different ways. Overall, our vision was to get this corporate doc strategy that enabled deployment management of business processes from multiple sources and to multiple delivery channels. So pretty big scope. The organizations involved comprised of global corporate organization responsible for doc and training. This organization consisted of many tech pubs from multiple lines of businesses. And the multiple lines of businesses, their customers had various expectations on their documentation, often overlapping, but sometimes unique requirements. I'm going to focus on this piece for this discussion today, as that was the piece I was the most involved in and became the piece that was most productionized, if you will. But there were other organizations involved as thinking about mapping out a global taxonomy corporately, engineering, installation support, something called product bulletins, all of these types of other information we were also bringing together and mapping, but my focus and my involvement was mainly in the doc area. If you have any other questions around taxonomy, I'll try my best to answer those kinds of questions, but the focus was more on doc. From a solution team's perspective, how we were organized to put together the solution were a couple of core pieces. Was the core business team. So really, this was a technology team that resided within the global documentation group. And this was a deployment and support team that had roughly 8 people, give and take over time, with various roles. At the beginning, a lot of data conversion. We had some vendor support for that. DTD and Stylesheet development from the ground up with a lot of vendor support on that piece as well. Authoring, publishing, and delivery process, so creating the process that everyone from an authoring and publishing and delivery standpoint was going to be using, and communicating and documenting that to the users. Training, which goes hand in hand with that, having a set of resources that could train new users joining this system. Content management, online help, data transformations. These are all various components of the support team team that we had for this program. Along with that, and working very tightly with the core business team, was an IT development team. And this team was more or less 4 people with a number of extended team contractors that focused mostly on the enterprise content management piece, including lifecycle workflow, delivery systems, how to get the content out of the systems, and the content systems into the delivery systems, and then, of course, all the server infrastructure that supported the apps along with a single sourcing solution. And more peripherally, perhaps, but involved nonetheless, was the IT project management office, so the PMO, with the project lifecycle process. They had a set of stages for approvals of server infrastructure and corporate software that was being deployed. Information architecture, vendor operations, communications leadership. These are all a variety of teams that get involved in this kind of large program. So, starting off with the deployment of the program, working back to the business requirements, really the key was to identify the current state business processes, and then work to develop the end state processes through a variety of use cases and process modeling approaches. And there were various tools and techniques used for doing that, with the key objective to derive the base requirements and track them via traceability matrices. I kind of have a little graphic in the upper right-hand corner that shows just an example of a spreadsheet, just a little piece of a spreadsheet where we had every individual requirement from every organization documented and tracking what the requirement was, who the originator was, the time frame for it, the which organization was doing what in terms of use case development, testing, development, etc. So, tracking the requirements to this granular level was key and a lot of work, but it was important to ensure that the requirements were well understood, both by the originators of the requirements and also the people who were developing the solution for them. So, tracking them, signing them off, getting them signed off from the business owners was done up front. And as I mentioned previously, multiple organizations were involved in creating these requirements. So communication, a lot of communication involved up front in understanding the business requirements before setting fingers to keyboards to create software or what have you to get a solution started. Our solution requirements were to provide a scalable enterprise content management environment that could handle the large volume of information we had across various content types, and also enable access to the CMS both internally and in the corporation, and also to external vendors, solution providers, writing vendors that could get access to the system and create it essentially around the world. To handle extensive reuse content within doc suites, across multiple software versions. So this was a really, this is more focused on the tech pubs area, but there was a tremendous amount of reuse that needed to happen in the doc suites, with a lot of manual effort going on in the content formatting tools that we could optimize by bringing it to an XML single sourcing type solution. To use a topic-oriented architecture, going more towards a DITA type of approach to creating our information, publishing and delivering our content, of course, via multiple channels. So one of the key requirements there was to reduce our publishing time frame to a few hours rather than several days, which we had in our older publishing environment. And of course, decommission the systems. So the components of the solution, I'm going to focus again more on the tech pubs area, was of course Arbortext editor, the publishing engine for Arbortext, and dynamic link manager for managing the links within the XML source. From a content management perspective, we went with Documentum to manage the content corporately across various organizations. And the publishing repository was a proprietary solution that we ended up going with, developed with IT. From a delivery point of view, the corporation had a web portal, and so we were to hook into those pre-existing web portals, also to produce DVDs for our customers and online help, context-sensitive help, which we called on-product help, because the source, or the output of the source, was delivered to the product in the software and became context-sensitive. So various types of outputs, multiple channels, if you will, from a delivery standpoint. So the solution focused on a proprietary XML DTDs. This solution was developed going back 5, even 6 years ago now. The DTDs were the core of the design for the solution. The XML contained a lot of the content and the metadata that needed to be leveraged throughout the authoring, content management, and delivery end-to-end solution. So we built into the DTDs and the CMS concurrently all of the metadata that needed to be used to track authoring and delivery information about the content. I'll get into a little bit about the why and why not we didn't get into using DITA. Largely it was a timing thing with DITA. We were focused on getting a topic-oriented solution that would work with Documentum and Arbortext, and at that time, them and many of the other solution providers weren't really mature on providing a lot of DITA support. So we ended up going with proprietary DTDs. I'll get to talking about what that looks like a little bit later. From a solution architecture standpoint, this is the diagram at a high level of what that looks like. So the writer on the left-hand side had a couple of key applications that they used to manage the content within Documentum using a piece of software called Documentum Desktop Client, and using Arbortext Editor to actually edit, create and edit their XML source and publish it and manage the links. So focusing on the Documentum piece, first of all, the desktop client was used to check in and check out the XML from to and from the CMS. You see in the middle here we have the Documentum orange cylinder with a couple of balloons at the top. Documentum is a highly configurable CMS. It requires substantial amount of work to set up to work specifically with a given type of documentation. So we used XML document applications. We created them and these applications defined the kinds of processing rules to Documentum on how to handle our XML content. So it came along with the DTD, some XSL to manage and work with the XML, and also what the metadata rules were for import and export of the content inside and outside of the CMS. The XML chunks were stored based on these configuration rules within Documentum. So the writer would access the chunks of XML from Documentum, check them out, open them within Arbortext Editor, and do their authoring. And a couple of the boxes here below, the blue boxes, the Arbortext publishing engine. We had 2 production servers for PE that were used to and continue to be used to generate PDF, HTML, and Java help directly to the author's desktop. And working along in the background, the author would interface with the DLM production server to create their links, register them, and store them within a DLM link repository. The links needed to be a solution like DLM needed to be in place to manage the links because we had a tremendous amount of reuse going on over several hundred, maybe 500 plus projects, documentation projects on the go within the system. It was probably up to 20% of those projects had a significant amount of reuse going on, both within their doc projects and across doc projects. So whenever a link was created from one chunk of information to another chunk of information, having a link repository to store that information was important, because as you can imagine, checking out a chunk of information and using it in multiple deliverable contexts has its challenges when you're just managing that content within the XML. Anyhow, so the link repository was there to help us with managing the profusion of links we had in our XML content. On the right-hand side of the diagram, we have the publishing repository itself, and I'm not going to go into too much detail there, but really the net effect was we had some solution to organize our publishable information, our delivery information, into products and solutions that got published to our web portal, our DVD, and onto the online help systems as well to the customer. I'm going to pause at this point and ask if there's any questions. I've sort of been trucking along, and do we have any questions from the audience at this point?
One just came in. It says, I used Arbortext and Styler back in 2008, and suddenly it's all recalled back. So I think he's enjoying the presentation.
Oh, that's good. So more a statement than a question, I guess.
Yes.
Okay, any others before I keep going? Gives me a chance to have a drink of water as I keep going.
Well, I don't see any more. Wait. Oh, it's just a note, he says. There you go. Okay.
Okay, great. I'll keep going. So from a design and implementation standpoint, the approach we took for the functions, the various capabilities of the system, we prioritized them and we grouped them into phases. It was a very large program overall, and our key focus initially was to get the TechPubs community into the system before getting other organizations who are more than likely less familiar with the concept of structured authoring in XML. So get the organization that really had the best view on and some more informed view on what structured authoring was. Get them into the XML single sourcing system. Get them with authoring and content management, and get some PDF output going. And we had one lead organization within the TechPubs community who drove into the system that way, which obviously there's bumpy roads to be crossed when you're doing this, but having a lead group doing it rather than the entire organization all at the same time has its benefits, as you can get some lead feedback from the adopting organization. So getting them with basically the same kind of capability that they had, say, using FrameMaker, for example, and then extending that through the addition of online help, single sourcing, so getting multiple outputs from the XML to online help to PDF to HTML. Then refining any formatting issues we had, say, the PDF style sheets, getting more improvements to authoring, and increasing the automation of the publishing system. These things all came in later phases, but were important to get further adoption and getting more and more organizations rolled into the system. From a user acceptance testing standpoint, this UAT is a piece we focus very hard on. Getting the early involvement of the key stakeholders, the writers, the project manager, the info architects, involved in use casing, in prototyping, seeing the various prototypes that we had at the beginning, early stages of the project, and then throughout as we were refining those things were very important for getting eventual sign-off. We hit snags along the road. We hit areas even as we were doing these things that we never had expected to see. Basically, gaps in the requirements always come through when you start doing prototyping and use casing, and this was a key area for us to continue focusing on to be successful. So we conducted formal UAT sessions with the user community, set those clear acceptance criteria, not only with the user community, the writers and the project managers, but also with the leadership team as well. Because often their views on the successful elements, components of the program can be wildly different, and so making sure that those things were well communicated and documented was key to coming out the other end of a UAT program with a sign-off and push the button to get to deployment and put it into production. So test cases derived directly from the use cases quite often, but sometimes we found places where we had those exposures where we didn't identify the requirements up front, so we got them into the test cases. Our challenges with design and implementation were really around keeping the pace of development going, to keep the various groups migrating into the system happy, if you will, or make sure that the requirements were there and being satisfied in the system as they were rolling in. So we prioritized, as I said at the beginning, we prioritized the groups, and the prioritization of the groups was based fundamentally on the prioritization of the development of the various functions. So getting PDF in place, we were able to have any group that was simply requiring PDF output into the system, for example, and then getting online help in place, getting various different versions of online help in place, and different other capabilities from the delivery end. I'm kind of simplifying it just to give an example of how the development of keeping the pace of development is key to keeping the adoption going, keeping the groups rolling into the system. And overall, the adoption of the system and the culture change that it means to the writing community is very significant. If they haven't been authoring in XML before, that was significant even from a structured authoring standpoint. We had a large amount of writers using structured authoring, for example, in Frame, but that even structured authoring in Frame can be wildly different, especially when you start taking away the content formatting aspect of that and moving into XML. So it was a rough adoption period, but having strong leadership, communicating the need to move into the system, socializing it, making sure that they're aware of what's in it for them as a writer or as a project manager, what capabilities you're going to get out of the system, and even as a writer, how you're going to get more skill sets around a technology that is becoming very prevalent in the industry. So those kinds of ideas and having success early on in the program really helped. At one point, someone branded me as an XML evangelist, I think, in the leadership team, and that's pretty much what you become as the program rolls out, as you start evangelizing about the benefits of these things. And, despite the fact that there can be shortfalls, especially early on in the rollout of the system. Our next chart is just a brief example of a kind of site that we would create for user acceptance testing, and it was quite articulate, and I thought it was a really good example of how we were organizing our test cases and just overall how we were managing the UAT as a project on its own for each type of each component of the architecture. So just a quick example of that. I have another quote. This is a great one. I heard this one from Eric Hannum. He's a data architect. When I went to a data CMS conference in San Francisco a couple years back, and he started his discussion saying, before there were parsers, it was dark, and no truer statement was made about XML or structured authoring and markup. Getting out of the world of content formatting, getting into the world of XML provides a tremendous amount of power over your content. So much so that it can almost be dangerous. You got to be very careful about how you manage that power. So we got into the world of XML and the ability to use XSL to massage our content in many different ways. And having a CMS, a core central CMS to check out and manage content over large spectrum of groups was really achieved a lot of efficiencies. So data conversion and migration was really the big first step to the program. Getting organizations into the system was to convert the XML. Our initial strategy was to convert unstructured info to a doc-book-like DTD, sort of a more chapter section type structure, and then convert any topic-oriented information, which we had some limited amount of in FrameMaker format, to more of the data-like DTD that we had developed. So a two-pronged approach to conversion, and really the rationale behind that was to accelerate deployment and get the organizations into the system as fast as possible, basically while funding is in place. So you have program constraints that obviously influence how you approach your XML conversion strategy. And this was one of them. A time-based constraint really forced us to adopt an more open, unstructured approach to XML for any unstructured information. The reason for that is self-evident. If you've ever had to try and restructure or start structuring unstructured information, that is quite a significant amount of effort and time involved in doing that, and that can be a fundamental stumbling block if you're going straight from unstructured FrameMaker to structured XML in a topic-oriented data-like environment or data environment. So to shortcut that a little bit, get groups into the system with unstructured information, get to that docbook-like format first is our approach. And we found that was fairly successful. The downside to that is, of course, later on when you want to get to an end-state DTD that's data-like, is the amount of time that still has to be put into structuring that unstructured or docbook-like, I should say, XML. So proprietary DTDs, the docbook-like one, leveraged a lot of the common elements of the legacy content we had in Frame or in Word. So XML container elements were relatively open and flexible from a DTD standpoint, and provided reuse of it at the chapter level. So we had basic reuse going on at a chapter level within a document. And then a data-like DTD that had structured authoring for conceptual, reference, and performance topics. I mean, anyone familiar with data will obviously recognize these kinds of this approach to writing, and so this was the sort of the key three areas that we're focused on in the data-like DTD. Hierarchical structures obviously had more semantic meaning, and they were designed to support modular XML reuse at a topic level. So getting down below the chapter level, if you will, to a slightly more granular level when you're talking about topics. The data-like DTD had less flexibility, promoted much more consistent writing and a much more common look and feel across our tech docs. So really that was our end state of DTD, to get all of the content docbook-like into the more data-like environment. So later on we used the transforms, XSL transforms, to get that content into the data-like XML. DTDs and Stylesheets, I could probably spend an entire webinar talking about that. There's a lot of effort goes into developing a DTD and the multiple style sheets for every channel. You have to deliver it. So really these were the key three channels we focused on. the PDF to get to where we were initially, HTML to get to where we wanted to get to on the web delivery portal in particular, and then online help and containing different types of output for online help like DHTML and Java help. And for all of these style sheets, we leveraged the Arbortext publishing engine. Around the online help piece, we worked with PTC to develop a custom application that sat on the PE servers, basically a help transformation engine that took the XML and output it to 4 different types of output, different flavors of dynamic HTML and Java help. And that was to support the various software design environments, the engineering environments that this documentation was being delivered into. We initially had these style sheets in DTD sitting on Arbortext 5.1. So we started off with XSLFO PDF style sheets, for example, with PDF. We found, though, that with XSLFO, the benefit is you're using an open standard. The not-so benefit is that for large documents, especially larger than 1,500 pages, we're looking at a long time to compose, and often hours to compose very large documents, which conflicted, of course, getting our content out quickly to the customer. When 5.2 was rolled out, and we had probably to some degree some influence on some of the capabilities of 5.2, we moved to the styler style sheets with FOSI extensions based on some advice from PTC, because we get much faster compose times. We're talking, in some cases, an order of magnitude less time, and even more. So moving from 5.1 to 5.2, XSLFO to styler made a big difference with our PDF compositions. Impact of DTD changes on all groups, and this is a bit of a motherhood statement from a single sourcing point of view, but it's amazing how much this drives effort in your rollout of your program. Is that any kind of DTD, no matter how any kind of DTD change, no matter how small, can impact all of the books in all of your organizations, and impacts all of the style sheets related to that DTD. And so we something I'll get into later is how we had a lot of change management forums to review any kind of change and make sure that it was, first of all, business appropriate for everyone, and that we had addressed all of the different touch points of any kind of DTD change. Content management, I'll just touch on briefly. We used, as I mentioned previously, Documentum, and had the concept of chunks within our XML, either at a chapter level or a topic level. And Documentum allowed us to configure these chunks to be imported into a larger construct called a publishable, which is essentially a document or a deliverable document. So using the configuration rules in Documentum, we can have the writers either authoring at a module or a topic level, or at a larger publishable or document level to be delivered to the customer. And working in conjunction with the Arbortext editor, we were able to configure Documentum to reassemble on the fly, for example, all the XML topics in line into one XML file when you checked it out from Documentum. Very powerful ability, and it allowed us to be flexible with how, from an authoring standpoint, how the authors approached their writing, either from writing modules point of view or from building books and delivering books point of view. Arbortext editor and Documentum desktop client. The clients for both of these, so the software for both of these packages were deployed to PC desktops. We had some Citrix in very limited situations, so we had some using Citrix boxes some writers able to access remotely through Citrix some of the systems, especially where they had performance challenges. And then, for example, writers in the Philippines and Asia having performance challenges with accessing the central servers. Citrix was very useful for that, but largely most of the writers used Arbortext Editor and Desktop Client directly on their PC desktops. So all of the prerequisites for software are communicated to the users that way. And DTDs and Stylesheets and all the other configuration files that come with the XML, the proprietary XML we have, are downloaded anytime the author checks out a document from Documentum to their PC. So it checks out to their PC desktop. And when they open it up in Arbortext Editor, all the wonderful style sheets for authoring in the Arbortext Editor and everything else comes down with it directly from Documentum. For managing the changes on the PC desktops, we had a number of patch upgrades that got posted on a common server, and we would send out instructions to the users on how to upgrade their PCs whenever important patch upgrades came out from either a PTC or EMC. Custom scripts for data transformations, checking content for markup, etc., streamline, improve various writer tasks. All these things were packaged as part of the Arbortext Editor environment in a custom menu. So we would develop any kind of special scripts for massaging the XML content in Arbortext Editor and then put them in a menu item for the writer to use. Writers would use an actual Documentum menu. So there's an API, Documentum API within Arbortext that they would use to paste object reference. So to take an object within Documentum and paste it essentially as a file entity within the XML source, and that's how they would leverage reuse. So a very fairly integrated environment between Arbortext Editor and Documentum. On the profile point of view, profile area, so profiles are very powerful concept. And we can get into a conversation on exactly what profiles are, but for those of you who know what profiles are within the Arbortext context, configuration files are used. And we mandated central control of those configuration files, and basically to ensure that we had a consistent setup of profiles being used across the different organizations because of the amount of reuse going on. We needed to have a very consistent set of profiles defined. So we used weekly PE server restarts to enable those changes on the PE servers. So we had a whole process involved for writers to submit any kind of changes for profiles they wanted to have them reviewed by a board, get them into the PE server restart every Thursday, for example. And that would enable those changes. Here's just a couple of screenshots just showing Arbortext Editor with Documentum. There's a Documentum window on the upper right-hand corner here. Just the ability to select an object and then use the Documentum menu to reuse that object within the XML. And then on the lower right is just a view of Documentum Desktop Client. From an info architecture standpoint, we had a standing committee of information architects were part of the TechPubs organization, and they established writing guidelines and standards that were focused on how to write in a topic-oriented fashion. The info architecture team had representatives from each of the business units. So this became a kind of steering committee or governance committee for establishing those writing guidelines. And the representatives decided on introducing any kind of new functionality that the writers would request, and any new tools and processes for ensuring any consistency and accuracy. So something called a change management request would be initiated. We call them CMRs. And this was tracked as a project. So any kind of new capabilities that needed to be introduced to the system would come into the Information Architecture Committee, be reviewed, and approved as a change management request. So governance and change management. So any new requirements would be vetted and prioritized as CMRs, and then the core team So myself and the various tech support folks would review the requirement, validate the needs through use cases, and we set upon designing, doing testing, and deployment of the new functionality. And sometimes we would have to involve IT for anything that was related more to the enterprise content management part of the system. Any progress on projects was reviewed weekly with the business stakeholders. We had regular leadership meetings on a weekly basis. A lot of new requirements were coming in as groups were adopting the system. More functionality was being requested, which was fine. We needed, of course, to have a mechanism for managing that input of new needs as the organizations were realizing some things they needed to have in addition to what they initially asked for. So we had this governance and change management approach put in place to manage, prioritize those projects with the business leaders, and then and in some cases, some of those projects had to go through our corporate IT organization for review and approval there. The main message here is to have that governance and change management process in place so that you can manage that input of new needs as they get identified. Software maintenance, just touch on this. There's a number of areas that you have to track. So our core team would track any new changes coming in from PTC regarding Arbortext software, the M0, M10 series of patches that would come out inevitably for every version of Arbortext, and same thing with Documentum. We would track all those changes, identify whether or not there was some patch improvements that were related to any tickets, for example, we may have submitted to PTC, and then make decisions around how we would approach that with the user community for deployment, test it, then deploy it. Desktop OS supporting apps. So we had corporately a desktop OS environment that was standard for all PCs. Anytime there was changes to that desktop Windows environment, we would have to test those kinds of changes as well. Weekly IT infrastructure meetings were in place to review the server maintenance schedules. Since PE and DLM and Documentum were all sitting on Solaris Unix boxes that were managed by the IT infrastructure folks, we would have to be abreast of any kind of changes or any kind of maintenance schedule reboots that would take place. This mainly because the system as a whole was being used globally. We had writers in the Philippines, China, Middle East, Europe, and North America and South America, all using the system globally. So around the clock, we had to be aware of any kind of changes, any kind of system downtime, and communicate those. In some cases, if they were extended, we'd have to review that with the business stakeholders and get that approved before allowing IT to do those kinds of changes. So a lot of communication around software maintenance is very important with the users, and in the blue box at the bottom, the constant interaction with the vendors is also very critical, both to understand and hopefully influence their future rollout plans. From a cost standpoint, infrastructure costs, server support were all really part of the IT corporate costs. Today, that's a kind of standard way of doing business with a lot of large organizations, is having the cost of infrastructure being part of a tax that's corporate. The annual software maintenance for example, for the pieces of Documentum and Arbortext that we had ran around $150,000 for an annual maintenance fee. From a business support point of view, we had roughly 5 people doing support to the user community through a ticket system. We had, for example, we were using the Clarify CRM software and there's a whole process instituted around that for the writers to create a trouble ticket in that system. One of our tech support folks would respond to that. Those 5 people were responsible for that, and also responsible as part of their roles to developing some of the customizations, the scripts, the XSL, etc., that would help and enhance the tool set. If you take a lot of the enhancements out, we had as little as, and currently we have as little as 2 people just maintaining the existing system. And I think that speaks a lot to how low cost from a support point of view a single sourcing environment can be, when you consider the fact that the system is now it's a single system with a single CMS with a lot of content management capabilities, able to through single sourcing output to multiple delivery channels. The benefits and the costs, the benefits far outweigh the costs in terms of the capabilities that you're getting. This is kind of winding down towards the last part of my presentation here. From a benefit standpoint, what I've done here is I've taken all the bullets that I had at the beginning of the presentation in terms of what we set out to do and hit upon what we actually achieved through the deployment of the program. So we needed to deliver easier web-based doc to customers. We did that with HTML delivery capability. We needed to improve our delivery channel agility. We did that by enabling the ability to source to publish time frame as little as an hour. So reducing the time frame we had for days down to as little as an hour to get content updated in the doc repository, published and delivered onto the portal, for example. Maximize the single sourcing reuse of content. Like I said previously, we had that central repository, the single set of DTDs, central control of the DTDs that enabled reuse at any level. In effect, multiple writers able to author on the same component, able to access a enterprise content management system and access those components and reuse them. And from an outsource partner point of view, able to easily access the source globally. From an implementation of the metadata point of view, metadata is managed in the DTD and CMS, and these were tied from authoring through to delivery. The metadata, in fact, some of the metadata that the authors would populate in the XML would wind up on the portal from a delivery point of view and enable the customer to actually search and filter on types of job functions, for example. And by allowing filtering and search techniques on the portal, enabling that metadata, you really provide an extra dimension to your content from a delivery standpoint. End-to-end lifecycle management, that comes with your CMS, and reducing similar processes. And as I've mentioned, we've gotten from multiple systems and processes down to one tool set and in one process. And I'm going to conclude the presentation on a quote that I had posted on my bulletin board at some point because I saw it, and with the deployment of a large system, and especially in the early days, there's a lot to take in. It's kind of equivalent to trying to drink water from an exploding fire hydrant sometimes. But the bravest are surely those who have the clearest vision of what is before them, glory and danger alike, notwithstanding, go out to meet it, and basically just dive in. And that's what this is all about. Is you dive in and get things rolling, and then through good process, good change management process, good governance, you can get to the end state that you're looking for. That's really about all I had for today. And if there's any QA or follow-up, appreciate if anyone would ask.
Wow, that was great. I'll give a couple of minutes for everybody to type in any questions that they have. That was great, Todd. Thank you. You gave a lot of good advice and especially a vision into how you did what you did. I think when we have heard questions over the last couple of years, it's always been, let me start with the tools and think about change process later. And it looked like you attacked that from the early days.
Yeah, we attacked it from the early days, and we really got better at it as things rolled on. Yeah, absolutely.
That's great. That's excellent. I don't see any questions. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time, but I think that's all we've got. So you gave us some idea. You had 5, and then you had 2. Here's a picture of Todd and a little bit about him. But you didn't tell us sort of the size of the enterprise you were supporting at either time.
Okay, missed that part. So basically, the number of writers, we had about 400 writers at one time accessing the system. So from a number of people point of view, that was the approximate size of the user community.
That's amazing, because that's that's about 1% staff to support all of that, which is amazing.
Yeah, and it's a little bit oversimplifying a little bit, because there is some IT infrastructure obviously involved as well. And so there's the server infrastructure that's supporting but that's part of the kind of corporate sort of support that you get with Unix servers and whatnot. But for the actual CMS, the actual support on that, and the actual Arbortext authoring, yeah, that's what it comes down to. It's about 2 people for simply supporting a deployed system.
That's fantastic. We have one statement. And someone who can, if you can type your question in, I'll add. Yes, I will ask it for you. One of our attendees said, "Very well done. The rate of delivery of the material covered made it easy to grasp an understanding of the subject matter." I agree. It's great, Todd. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Appreciate that feedback.
Excellent. Dinesh, if you want to go ahead and type it in. All right. Takes a while to type. Must be a good question. So what's on the plan for you next?
What's on the plan for me next? That's a good question.
Are you still getting enhancement requests? Are you still getting things that you're doing?
Well, right now we're in a situation where we're divesting the businesses, so this system's more in a wind down mode right now. So there's no more development going on per se on the system. Mm-hmm. But what I would say is what we would be doing with the system is getting more to a more personalized content out to the customer, getting it and that was really one of the end state capabilities we wanted to get in place, was to have a more robust ability around personalizing content, syndication of content, and being able to provide levels of service, of content to the customer.
Very cool. So the first half of the question, I think, is here. It says, while using Arbortext Editor 2 years back, I realized the learning curve for a beginner is not so easy.
Yes, that's what I can say. Arbortext, some of the interface elements and components can be arcane, and we did extensive amount of training and documentation on how to use Arbortext, especially with the process that we had in place for our single sourcing solution. So there was a lot of effort up front on training users. And one thing that we could have done better, and I would recommend folks do, and I've seen other organizations, companies do this, is you can customize the interface of Arbortext Editor by removing a lot of the noise maybe that they can't use, some of the buttons that they can't use, and to emphasize some of the buttons they can use for working with their content. And there's ways of doing that with Arbortext Editor. It's a highly configurable tool.
Excellent, because that's a good We're going to follow up with the rest of his question. It's in two parts. In India, many good IT companies use traditional methods of check docs, such as Flare Help and Manual RoboHelp, Doc to Help, and others. So when an organization plans to switch to XML authoring, what kind of homework should it plan before making a decision?
What kind of homework? So switching to an XML. So if switching to an XML editor, I think the homework you have to do, first of all, from a technology standpoint, from a tool standpoint, is understanding how you're going to deploy capabilities to the writer using the tool. So emphasizing those kinds of elements, things like like formatting elements, like the bold, italics, those kinds of buttons on the interface. So figuring out what capabilities you want to emphasize in the interface, figuring out what kinds of additional capabilities you want to add to the Arbortext tools. Like as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, we still have a menu that is a custom menu that is a drop-down menu that has additional XSL scripts, for example, that can do various things like accessing different attribute values in the XML to do different operations. So thinking about what kinds of additional capabilities you're going to want to extend the tool set with, and working that in the tool set, figuring out how you're going to lay that out in the tool set. From an authoring community standpoint, clearly documenting and having in place a good training regimen. We had even being a doc and training organization, we had a training course that writers were able to register for corporately that specifically focused on how to use the single sourcing solution. There was an overview course, there was a writing course, there was a delivery course. So having those elements in place as upfront as possible, and obviously refining that as you move forward with new capabilities. I hope I answered the question. I'm not sure if I was on the right track with that.
I think so. We will find out. Does that answer your question? I think it's certainly some good place to start. You said yes, partially. So there's a lot of things to work out and think about, and I think that probably starting with the business case and the stakeholders and finding out what's doing all of these kinds of things that Todd's been talking about the whole time helps to answer that question too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. A lot of effort and time up front on the business case and requirements gathering.
Right. So there are so many factors that it's a long process to make a decision.
It very much is. And you're working with multiple groups too to make those decisions. Dancing that fine line between the business requirement and solution, and working with IT and how that solution can or should look like, and going back and forth and being able to balance the requirement versus the solution, because sometimes there's a lot of constraints on the IT side of things that have to be considered to get a business requirement in place. So that's an area too that needs to be focused on as you're going through this use case process, and developing the requirements one by one.
Excellent. Oh, hey, got one more. I appreciate the PTC University that offers training, but I underwent their training videos when I worked for Bassware. That was 2008, and I wish someday I would love to be able to purchase and deploy this platform. We love to hear that. Oh, that's great. I didn't include the video, or he smiles. I didn't include the slide that shows all the resources available to Arbortext community users. There are, tens of them, probably close to 20 or so resources that are available just online or anywhere. In-person groups like this were the first, virtual one anyway. But I will make sure that gets posted to the website when I post Todd's slides and the video as soon as I get it converted to a format that the website and everybody who's viewing it kind of prefers. So that's great. Thank you. And he says, thank you for your time. Thank you,
Wonderful.
Todd. That was fantastic. I couldn't have asked for more.
Good stuff.
It is good stuff. So, all right. Thank you. And I hope everyone will join us again next month. Next month is September. So we're going to talk about how to do math in XML. We're going to have design science to talk about the tricks about how to do that. It's not so easy. All right. Thank you. Thanks to both of you. It looks like everyone enjoyed it. Thank you. And thanks for attending and asking good questions.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.